Commission President, thank you so much for joining us on CNBC. Can I start by asking you to give us a little more detail on this new pledging effort? And perhaps I can ask the question by adding, is there not a risk with other programs already running and the Commission building a new recovery fund plan that there might be some confusion about these different projects and there may be some form of response fatigue?
Well, here is what we're doing. We know that the coronavirus doesn't respect any borders or nationalities. It hits the whole world. And the only possibility to defeat this virus is by finding a vaccine. There are many, many activities, but we thought it's a global endeavor. We need a joint global action to have a coordinated approach to find a vaccine. When we have a vaccine, to produce it and to deploy it all over the world. And for that, we aligned all the stakeholders and actors that are necessary. It's the WHO, it's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, just to name some, CEPI and Gavi. And we also aligned many, many countries that support us because for finding a vaccine, producing it and deploying it all over the world, you need money. And therefore, we have on Monday, the 4th of May, an online pledging conference. And we hope that we're going to raise up to $8 billion. This is needed to fill the gaps that are obvious already. But this is only the start. I think we will need more to fulfill this task.
The GDP data we've seen out of Europe clearly shows the deep wounding impact of the virus so far. How concerned are you that we are set up for a significantly worse second quarter in growth terms for Europe? And what do you think the consequences of that may be for cohesion in the EU?
Well, indeed, we are in a very deep economic crisis, and it will take quite a while to recover from that. And therefore, the European Union gave a very strong answer immediately to inject liquidity in our economies that are hard hit by the lockdown. We spend a sum for the economy of 3.4 trillion up to today, the European Union and the member states. And we are now working on, indeed, a 7-year budget for the European Union, topped by a big recovery program that is more or less something like the Marshall Plan. So to really have front-loaded a lot of investment in research, in innovation, in the sectors we want to promote, like the digital or the European Green Deal. So to kickstart the recovery of the European Union, and this injection is necessary.
But as you know, ever since the announcement of the recovery plan was made, there's been scepticism on a number of fronts. Some say it's unlikely that you will get significant private contributions. Do you think that's correct?
Well, I think that we will be successful with this recovery investment because it is composed in a way that all 27 member states say, let's go for the idea. Of course, the devil is always in the details, so there's a lot of discussion about how to spend the money and how much in loans, how much in grants. But the overall idea to have the 7-year budget of the European Union topped by a recovery instrument and this front-loaded for the acute crisis, this finds a lot of positive response.
Can you tell us how much has already been pledged by private business?
No, this is just not to get this confused. There is no pledging of private business. So we were, the two of us, initially talking about the pledging conference for the global endeavor that all countries of the world are pledging to find a vaccine, to produce it and to deploy it. This is a global initiative that the European Commission has started, but the whole world is joining now. This is one side. But the other one is the recovery program, and here I'm not talking of billion, I'm talking of trillion, for the European Union guaranteed by the member states, that puts the European Union in the Commission to raise money on the market and channel it through the budget for an investment program for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, my apologies. I think I may have confused things by using similar language. My point really is, are you realistic in thinking that the private sector will commit money to the recovery fund, given the depth of economic distress that we currently see in Europe? That will clearly flag concerns for those private sector contributors that they will ever see their money back.
Well, the economic crisis hits the whole world because this virus knows no borders. So it's not confined to a certain region of the world, but it affects the whole world. And the whole world, rightly so, to contain the virus, had to partly lock down their economies. But here in the European Union, we have the might of 27 member states and the whole European Union. So this is a reliable, a strong entity. And we have a big advantage. We have the single market. This is where the power, where the strengths come from. So even if it is difficult at the moment, being the international global trade and economies are not easy to restart, we have the single market in the European Union. It's the strongest and largest single market all over the world, and this is an enormous support for the strength and the might of the European Union and the 27 member states.
Commission President, if the money from the fund is ultimately lent out to countries like Italy, Spain, France and others, when will that money have to be paid back? What kind of time frame are you considering at the Commission for the return of that money?
Oh, you're too early. We are just in the starting point to set the program and to negotiate the details. But one thing is for sure, that the European Commission can raise money under very favorable conditions, and this is important. And there's the part which we should not forget, the strong part of the European budget itself, which of course is grants and which strongly supports, of course, the member states that are the hardest hit by the crisis.
Obviously, we're beginning to see countries announce the lifting of their current restrictions and their lockdown plans. How encouraged are you that this is the right step to take at this time in Spain, Italy, Germany and other countries? How fearful are you otherwise that this may ultimately lead to a second wave of the virus?
Yeah, this is for all of us here in the European Union a very fragile process. Thanks God that we have a lot of excellent advice by virologists and epidemiologists. So depending on the region and the state the region is in, so the epidemiological situation the region is in, a confinement measure is lifted and then observed for 2 to 3 weeks whether the virus flares up again or whether it's possible to contain the virus at a stable point. And then the next step for the next lifting of measures, which shows that this is a slow process. It will last long, and we will have to learn to live with the virus until we have a vaccine. And that's why we're doing this pledging conference on Monday.
The Swedish government and some members of the German government and indeed the Australian government have suggested it would be a good idea to have an investigation into the origins of COVID-19. Does the Commission also support that idea, and would it be helpful if China cooperated?
Well, of course, one of the lessons learned from this pandemic is that we need more robust data overall. And we need more centralized than an entity that is analyzing those data so that the early warning mechanism is way better. For example, at the level of the European Union, we know that we need a more robust data system for such situations as we see it right now with the coronavirus. And for building up a system that is that you can count on, we need transparency. So we will have to work on that after the crisis.
And that means you would like to see China work together with the Commission and others to get to the bottom of exactly how this virus emerged.
Yes, I think this is for all of us important. I mean, for the whole world it is important. You never know where the next virus is starting. So we all want that for the next time we have learned our lesson and we have established a system of early warning that really functions, and the whole world has to contribute to that.
Are you concerned, though, that that may ultimately lead to a weakening of the relations with China at this point and some cooling off or distancing?
No, I don't think so, because it's in all our own interest. I mean, this pandemic has caused so much damage, so it's in our own interest of every country that we are better prepared the next time. We do not know when such a crisis occurs again, but we should be better prepared now.
One of the proposed measures for dealing with emerging from the crisis has been the talk of using contact tracing technology in Europe to help with the process of lifting the lockdowns. And yet it's raised huge controversy in France, where people have become concerned about privacy issues. Now, Europe treasures technological privacy. It's something that the community has focused very closely on. Do you think it is a good idea that we do introduce this contact tracing technology and set aside privacy concerns?
No, we should not set aside privacy concerns, but it is possible to have a tracing app. For us, it's important that it is interoperable throughout the whole European Union. And for that, it has to be decentralized. So the technicians, the researchers are working on that. You can have privacy and at the same time a smart system that indicates whether you have been in contact for a certain time with a person that was corona or is corona positive. In a decentralized version where you do not centralize the knowledge, this is possible, and this is what we're working on.
And Commission President, let me just wrap up by asking you about cohesion at this point. There have been, as you know, tensions in relations between member states. We've seen a German leadership, I think, that has been more conciliatory around some of the funding issues. Do you feel now that things have returned to where they were pre-crisis, or do we still need to see further efforts to keep the Italians, the Spanish and others who've been very badly hit on board with the project?
Our Italian friends, our Spanish friends have indeed very badly been hit by the virus. It was heartbreaking to see that. It was, on the other hand, amazing to see after a difficult first period, the solidarity then between the member states, so patients that have been treated in France and in Germany, or doctors and nurses coming from Romania and Poland going to Italy, ventilators being brought to Spain, and many, many other examples. Now we have to stand together to work on the economic recovery. I mean, the last time that the Western world has seen a drop in GDP between 5 and 10% in 1 year was in the 1930s with the Great Depression, not even in World War II. So this shows how huge the task is that is ahead of us. And what is good is that everybody is aligned behind the idea that indeed we need for the next 2 to 3 years a front loading of common investment, mainly, of course, targeted towards the countries that have been the most hit by the virus and the following economic lockdown. And we are determined to invest in future-proof policies. That is the European Green Deal, that is digitalization, and this is resilience. And there's a strong commitment from all 27 member states to go forward on this road.
Commission President, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Geoff.